Welcome back. Beginning this week, Alberta business owners had to choose whether they'll be asking patrons for their proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test before entering their establishment, or they can choose to not ask people for their records but go back to reducing their occupancy to 1/3 of their business's fire code capacity, which essentially puts them back into restriction mode. Some people are saying this is the government's way of downloading the liability onto business owners and that they could suffer again. Annie Dormuth is with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and she joined me earlier this week to discuss how establishments have been handling this abrupt change. Take a look.
Well, definitely a lot of confusion and frustration for Alberta small businesses through, I would have to say, a very rushed rollout of the province's restriction exemption program, which essentially is a proof of vaccination program where for certain industries, you can either choose to have a proof of vaccination program or you can choose to go under certain restrictions. So for the restaurant industry, that would be the complete closure of all indoor dining. Well, for the fitness industry, for example, that would be the complete closure of all in-person group classes. So with all of this, business owners, I would have to say, are simply trying to rapidly adjust their operations. Most provinces that have gone through this at least provided business owners a week notice, provided guidance to business owners within a week of it being imposed on them. Whereas here in the province, of course, as we all know, the announcement came late Wednesday. And if you can believe it, the public health orders and guidance to business owners were made available online at Saturday evening around 8 p.m. So that really gave business owners a day notice to prepare as well. They also made the last minute decision over the weekend to exclude all retail from being able to access the restriction exemption program, which meant that retail across the province is now restricted at 1/3 capacity. So I would have to say this has just been a day, a couple days of adjustment and a lot of stress for business owners.
What are you hearing from businesses across the province about this? Which way are people going to be leaning? Are they leaning more towards that vaccine passport, the exemption program, or are they going to simply go back to the fire code restrictions, the capacity restrictions?
Well, we're mostly hearing businesses go through the way of proof of vaccination again, just to keep their operations as open as possible. However, that still means they are losing customers at the door, which again is why we are calling on the provincial government to reopen provincial support mechanisms and funding made available to business owners, to those that are under the capacity restrictions, such as retail, as well as those that are under the restriction exemption program, because then they are still under a technical restriction. They are still going to be losing customers and also need new funding made available to them to basically follow this program. For example, if businesses want to hire additional staff to check that proof of vaccination at the door, as well as businesses potentially looking at buying QR scanners at the door as well when the QR code becomes available across the province. So we do strongly call on the provincial government to once again open up direct grant supports for small businesses. The easiest way to do this, of course, is reopening its previously closed SME relaunch grant and make that funding available to business owners immediately.
Mm-hmm. And you did mention the QR code, and of course that could take quite a while to roll out. Is there a lot of confusion by businesses that you're talking to as to how this is supposed to be implemented?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth between public health on clarifying some of some of the guidelines in the restriction exemption program. For example, does an Uber Eats driver have to be vaccinated when entering the business if that business is under the REP? All of those questions are swirling around, and unfortunately, not a lot of guidance made available to by the provincial government to business owners online. They pretty much are going with some broad-based guidelines made available online, but of course, a lot of that does not answer their questions.
It's very concerning, I'm sure, if they're looking at possibly receiving a fine for something like this. So how are businesses supposed to enforce this also? Are you hearing concerns
business owners are hanging on by a thin thread, who are in the RIP. These are the businesses that have been hardest hit by prolonged restrictions for over 18 months. They are doing their best to ensure that their business does survive. I call on all Albertans, if you have a problem with the RAP, to take up your concerns to your local MLA and your provincial government, and not to the business owner or its staff.
Annie Dormuth, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course, always great to be on the show.